The Force is old and full of shadows.
He opens his eyes and breathes. Not the hiss-click of a respirator cycling through processed air. Not the mechanical push of atmospheric mix filtered through carbon scrubbers and pumped into a sealed mask at measured intervals. Air, real air, moving on its own, drawn into lungs that pull and expand and contract without assistance from anything. It hits him before anything else does. The smell. Sulfur, iron, something deeper beneath both of those, organic and burning and completely alien to the interior of a life support suit. Mustafar's atmosphere doesn't clean or filter. It simply is, the way a wound simply is, honest about what it contains. It burns at the back of his throat on the way in. It burns on the way out. His body pulls it in again anyway, automatically, because it can. He doesn't move. He looks at his hands first. Veteran habit, older than any instruction he ever received. Confirm your equipment before you assess your environment. Left hand. Flesh, he can feel the heat of the air across the back of it, the convective warmth rising off the lava channel below in long, irregular waves that don't stop. 5 fingers. Real nerve endings. He flexes them once, and the sensation floods in full, not the partial feedback of mechno-sensors calibrated to relay some approximation of touch, but actual pressure, actual temperature differential. The slight drag of tightening skin across knuckles. Right hand. Durasteel, the old one, the Geonosis prosthetic, unmodified, not yet integrated into the life support architecture that would use pain as a management tool. He flexes it. The servo joints respond with their familiar whisper hum. He has 2 hands. Both of them are his. One of them is the wrong kind of wrong. He is 22 years old. He is not 22 years old. He stays where he is. The platform surface is grated durasteel, hot through the soles of his boots. The wind off the main channel pushes from the south in long, steady pulses, thermal convection, regular as a tide, generated by 2,000 degrees of molten rock moving below. The sky above Mustafar is the color of a bruise at its deepest point. The lower atmosphere orange-red and heavy with particulate from the volcanic system, the upper layers dark in a way that has nothing to do with the hour. The lava glow from below turns everything on this platform the same shade of amber white, a light that belongs to no sun anywhere. There are no shadows on Mustafar. The glow comes from everywhere. Behind him, the facility. He knows what's in there without looking. Newt Gunray. Poggle the Lesser. Wat Tambor. The remainder of the Separatist Council. He completed that part before, whatever this is, happened. He doesn't look. The mission was finished. The bodies are documentation now. Proof that the Confederacy was dissolved. The war technically concluded before the war truly ended in the way it would take decades to stop feeling in the bones of the galaxy. His lightsaber is on his belt. He registered it at the same moment he registered his hands, weight and position, the slightly worn texture of the grip material. The familiar thermal hum of the crystal at rest. He does not draw it. He does not move. Then, the memory surfaces. Not a thought, a sensation. The weight of the suit. The specific and absolute weight of an apparatus engineered around the premise that the person inside it was not permitted comfort as a default state. The difficulty of raising one arm against its own resistance. Servo-assisted movement that nonetheless communicated every operation as effort, as cost, as a transaction the machine permitted rather than a motion the body chose. The constant pressure at the sealed interfaces where metal met what remained of flesh. And the sound. The sound above all else. His own breathing, mechanical and inescapable, hiss-click, hiss-click. The metronome of a man for whom breathing had become something that happened to him rather than something he did. It releases in less than a second. Just the memory of the weight. Then, it is gone. He stands on the platform. He thinks. The thinking is not new. He spent 23 years inside that apparatus with nothing to do between operations except think, and the discipline of it. The ability to move through a tactical situation without burning fuel on the emotion of it, without losing resolution to grief or rage or the particular vertigo of knowing exactly how much has already been lost, became the only thing the suit never managed to take. He uses it now. Palpatine is en route. He departed Coruscant after the temple. The shuttle is fast, a direct line from the core, and the transit from Coruscant to the Outer Rim buys somewhere between 6 and 10 hours. More than enough. He files this and moves forward. Padmé is landing. He can hear it beginning. The low hum of repulsors adjusting for platform approach, the recognizable pitch of her ship settling into the thermal turbulence above the channel. She came because she didn't know what else to do. Because the man she married had disappeared inside something months ago, and she came here the way she always moved toward the things that frightened her, directly, without waiting for conditions to improve. He knows this about her with the kind of clarity that only accumulates across decades. He nearly killed her for it. He files this and moves forward. Obi-Wan is on that ship. He came because he always came. Regardless of what a situation asked of him, regardless of what the cost assessment suggested, he stowed away because it was the right thing to do, and because Obi-Wan Kenobi has never in his life allowed tactical logic to fully override the part of him that believes showing up matters. In a version of this that no longer exists, his arrival on this platform ended with fire and black volcanic shore and nothing left to save. He came anyway. Anakin holds this a moment longer than the others. Then, he continues. Order 66. It is either executing right now across every theater the Republic military maintains, or it has just finished executing its first wave. The clone commanders with undisturbed chips are carrying out the termination sequence, Jedi generals in the field, Jedi in transit, Jedi in quarters they believed were secure. He knows the sequence, not in outline, in specific detail. He knows which operations were coordinated centrally, which were improvised at the unit level, which ones failed the first time and were completed on a second approach. He has the entire architecture of the worst day in galactic history stored in memory with the clarity of something you were present for. There is nothing he can do about it from this platform, not in the next hour. He catalogs what he cannot save. He does not grieve it here. He moves forward. This coldness, this controlled separation from the full weight of what is happening at this exact moment across the galaxy is not what it appears to be from the outside. It is not indifference. It is not the dark side operating as a dampening agent. It is the specific and hard-earned product of having sat for 2 decades inside an apparatus that did not permit weakness and having arrived, eventually, at something on the far side of rage. Past grief in the way that you are past a sickness you nearly didn't survive, not immune, not healed, but no longer capable of being leveled by it. The rage burned itself out. What's left is cleaner and more precise and, in its own way, more dangerous. Clarity. Clarity about what needs to happen in the next 72 hours. Clarity about the decisions he is capable of making without hesitation. Clarity about the fact that he has exactly one chance at this, and that the difference between anchoring this timeline and collapsing it is not passion, but precision. He was not capable of this at 22. He knows that now with the same certainty he knows everything else. He is capable of it now. The ship comes in from the north, low over the channel, silhouetted against the burning lower atmosphere in a way that should be dramatic, and is, instead, just a ship landing on a platform he is standing on. The repulsors adjust for the thermal updraft off the lava flow, a small correction, competent and practiced. The landing struts contact the platform with a sound that travels through the durasteel under his boots before it reaches his ears. The dust from the landing skirts outward in a thin circular wave. The heat takes it. The ramp lowers. He stands with his hands loose at his sides. His feet are shoulder-width apart, and his weight is centered, and his breathing is steady. The sulfur air moving in and out without resistance, and somewhere in the back of his mind the simple fact of it, that he breathes without machinery, that he stands without servos, that his body is his own again and whole enough to do the work that's coming, sits quietly, not celebrated, just present. He watches the top of the ramp. He knows what her face will look like. He knows how wrong he was about everything the first time he saw it. He waits. The first thing Padmé does when she clears the ramp is look at his hands. Good instinct. He notices this about her even now, the way she reads a room through its details before she tries to read the people in it. She is already working through something before she says a word. And what she is working through is the space between what she expected to find on this platform and what is actually here. She expected the man she'd been losing for months, the one who smiled wrong and reasoned wrong and looked at her sometimes with a quality of desperation that felt less like love and more like something trying to keep grip on the last stable surface before a fall. She expected that man at the worst version of himself, and she came anyway, because that's what she does. What she finds instead is Anakin Skywalker standing still in the sulfur wind, both hands at his sides, looking at her the way you look at someone you have already grieved. Not longing, not the desperate, grasping need she'd been watching build in him for months. Something quieter and much worse, the careful, exhausted steadiness of a person on the far side of loss. She stops at the bottom of the ramp. "I know," he says. "We need to step aside." 3 words. No explanation. She doesn't move immediately, and he doesn't push, and in the silence between them the thermal wind off the channel pushes her hair across her face, and she doesn't brush it away, because she is still reading him. She steps aside. Then Obi-Wan comes down the ramp. He has his hand near his saber, but not on it, a distinction that would mean nothing to someone who didn't know him, and means everything to someone who does. He has positioned himself for a draw that hasn't happened yet. He has been ready for this conversation since before the ship left Coruscant, and the shape of what he's ready for: confrontation. Terrible negotiation. The last attempt to reach a man who may already be past reaching is visible in every line of him. He reaches the platform surface and stops. Anakin turns to face him. Then he does something Obi-Wan is not prepared for. He unclips his lightsaber, which has not been ignited, which has not been in his hand at any point since Padmé's ship landed, and sets it on the platform railing. He takes a step back from it. "Master," he says. 1 word. The word lands differently than it should. Obi-Wan has heard that word from this man's mouth thousands of times across 13 years, and he knows every register it can occupy, the automatic respect of early training, the slightly ironic warmth of their middle years, the tight-jawed compliance of harder months. He knows them all. What he is hearing now doesn't belong to any of them. It has the quality of something said after a long silence, something that was withheld and is now being returned. Obi-Wan doesn't reach for the lightsaber on the railing. He doesn't move at all. "Anakin," he says, and the caution in it is precise. "I need you to listen," Anakin says. "Not as a Jedi, as a soldier. I have a tactical briefing and limited time." A pause. Then, "All right." What follows is not a reunion. It is not an emotional scene in any register that the platform's particular horror deserves. It is a military briefing, delivered in the flat, efficient register of a commander reporting to a superior officer, and it begins not with the hardest thing, but with the most operationally urgent. The inhibitor chips. He tells Obi-Wan that CT-5555 was right, not partially, not in spirit, fully and specifically right. The behavioral modification hardware embedded in every clone's neurological architecture is not a loyalty protocol or a safeguard against separatist subversion. It is a termination mechanism keyed to a specific command sequence. The chips are the order. He gives Obi-Wan the transmission frequency designation and the server location in Tipoca City where the program documentation is archived. He gives it in enough specific detail that it can be independently verified by anyone with access to Kaminoan records, because he needs Obi-Wan to understand that this is not interpretation. Obi-Wan listens without speaking. His face does what it does when Obi-Wan is processing something that conflicts with the model of the world he arrived with, goes still and very careful, and does not give anything away. Palpatine is Darth Sidious. He says it without preamble, without softening, without the kind of gradual approach that might make it easier to absorb. He says it as operational fact, the way you would say that a bridge is down or a perimeter has been breached, an unchangeable condition of the current situation that all further decisions must account for. He has been Darth Sidious for longer than either of them has been alive. The separatist movement was constructed in his office. The clone army was commissioned through a proxy he later had murdered. Both sides of this war, every campaign, every death, every planet scorched to demonstrate the cost of resistance, were managed from the Chancellor's suite. Palpatine needed the war the same way a fire needs oxygen, to grow large enough that the fear of it would make people willing to surrender whatever it took to make it stop. Obi-Wan still says nothing. He's en route, Anakin says. He left Coruscant after the temple. He expects to find a new apprentice on this platform. He needs to be intercepted here before he returns to Coruscant and executes whatever secondary contingencies we don't yet know about. And you know all of this, Obi-Wan says. Finally, carefully, how? The question has the quality of a probe. Obi-Wan is not asking for an explanation of the intelligence chain. He is asking what he's been asking since he came down the ramp. Who are you and where is the man I came here for? He knows Anakin. He has known Anakin with the intimacy of a teacher and a brother and occasionally an adversary across 13 years. He knows exactly how Anakin sounds when he's afraid, when he's hiding something, when he's performing a version of himself that doesn't quite fit. He knows the specific rhythm of Anakin's voice when he's lying, and the different specific rhythm of it when he's certain. None of those registers are present. What is present is something he doesn't have a category for, and Obi-Wan Kenobi in Anakin's experience is a man who has a category for almost everything. He is trying to figure out if this is a trap. Anakin gives him the one thing that cannot be fabricated. "Do you remember the night on Drongar?" he says. "The supply mission. We were pinned in the eastern drainage channel for 6 hours waiting for Cody's extraction team." Something shifts in Obi-Wan's face. Small, a recognition the rest of him hasn't caught up to yet. "You remember it as a lesson in patience," Anakin says. "You've told the story twice to Temple younglings. In your version you told me that the Force does not measure time the way fear does. You've always remembered it that way." Obi-Wan is very still. "That's not what you said," Anakin says. "You thought I was asleep. I wasn't. What you actually said was about Qui-Gon. You said he used to make you sit in silence on missions until you stopped counting the minutes and started listening to what they contained. You said you were still learning how." He pauses. "You said you weren't sure you deserved the version of yourself he saw." The silence that follows has a different texture than any that came before it. Obi-Wan's careful, controlled face has gone through something in the last 10 seconds that it doesn't fully recover from. He is not skeptical in the same way anymore. He is frightened, and the fear is the particular fear of a man who is beginning to believe something he had not given himself permission to consider. He looks at Anakin for a long time. Across the platform, Padmé has not moved since she stepped aside. She has not spoken once. She is watching two men who love each other process information that should, by any reasonable measure, destroy them both, and neither of them is breaking. And that is the most frightening thing she has witnessed since the clone troopers started killing Jedi. Because it means this is not the first time either of them has been broken. Because it means they are past the point where this size of thing breaks people. Obi-Wan walks to the railing. He picks up Anakin's lightsaber. He holds it for a moment with both hands, his head slightly down, looking at it the way you look at something that is simultaneously familiar and completely changed. Then he turns and holds it out. Anakin takes it. Obi-Wan says nothing about belief. He says nothing about forgiveness or understanding or the 10,000 things that exist in the space between two people who have just had this conversation on a platform over a lava river at the end of the Republic. He says, "When does he land?" He asks Padmé to go inside, and she goes. No argument, no negotiation. She looks at him for a moment, the same reading quality she had at the bottom of the ramp, working the details before she works the person, and then she looks at the facility door and then back at him, and she nods. That in itself is something. The woman who walked into a separatist execution arena without a weapon. The woman who boarded a ship to Mustafar because she decided she was going regardless of what the tactical picture suggested. That woman looks at him, reads something in the way he's standing, and goes inside without asking him to explain himself. He watches the door close behind her. Then he turns back to the platform and repositions. It requires thought. Not because the positioning is complicated, it isn't, but because it must be exact. He moves to the center of the landing area, 7 meters from the facility door, facing the approach vector. He adjusts his weight, neutralizes his posture, lets his arms settle at his sides with the specific quality of looseness that belongs to a man who has just completed a significant task and is standing in the aftermath of it. Controlled, settled, available for what comes next. From the approach angle of a Theta-class shuttle on standard final descent, this will look exactly right. A victorious apprentice at the completion of his first mission. Standing over his work, he waits. The thermal wind off the channel pushes steady and hot from the south. The lava glow underneath the platform's grating casts its amber light upward through the gaps in the durasteel, turning the platform's surface into a grid of golden shadow. Somewhere below, the main channel moves at a pace that doesn't look like movement until you watch it for long enough. Slow and inexorable and 2,000 degrees, carrying everything the volcano produces toward wherever the geography sends it. He waits. The original timeline contrast surfaces without invitation, the way they all do. Not a thought, but a location. The Chancellor's office. The specific angle of the window behind the desk. Mace Windu's purple blade held at a man's throat. Palpatine on his knees, his hands raised, his voice doing something it had never done in Anakin's presence. Cracking, breaking, producing the sound of genuine terror. He's too dangerous to be kept alive. And then, the lightning. The way the cosmetic stability of his face dissolved under it, the bone structure beneath suddenly apparent, the careful construction of the Chancellor's appearance giving way to something older and rawer and, Anakin had thought then, more real. He hadn't understood it until much later. The damage was real. The face was real. The performance around it, the please, I'm too weak, I'm at your mercy, was theater, precisely calibrated to the specific weakness it needed to find. He releases the memory. The platform is still here. The wind is still here. He hears the shuttle before he sees it. The sound comes first as a change in the air's upper frequency, ion drive harmonics. A particular pitch specific to Theta-class propulsion systems, dropping through the atmosphere at an angle consistent with a pilot who is not in any hurry, because the pilot has no reason to be. Then the shape of it materializes out of the dark upper atmosphere, the distinctive silhouette, the bladed command fin, running lights that have no military necessity and are present because the vessel belongs to someone who regards ceremony as a form of governance. It comes down slowly. It always came down slowly. Palpatine's arrivals were never entrances, they were statements. Given the time they needed to land, the downblast from the repulsors hits the platform in a wave that carries ion exhaust and something chemical beneath it, the specific smell of a vessel that operates in close proximity to extreme wealth, climate-controlled interiors, expensive fuel additives, the trace of whatever Palpatine uses to make recycled ship air smell intentional rather than mechanical. It mingles with the sulfur and the iron and the organic burn of Mustafar's atmosphere in a combination that belongs nowhere in the galaxy except this exact moment. The landing struts contact the platform. The sound travels through the durasteel into the soles of his boots before it reaches his ears. The repulsors cycle down. The boarding ramp extends with the hydraulic precision of a system maintained by people whose job is to ensure that nothing about its principal's transport ever suggests inconvenience. The Red Guards descend first, 2 of them, crimson from crown to sole, moving to positions on either side of the ramp base with the trained economy of men who perform this sequence several times a day. Then Palpatine appears at the top of the ramp, and the Red Guards look at the platform, and then they look at Palpatine, and Palpatine makes a gesture, small, unhurried, the gesture of a man dismissing an irrelevant concern, and the Red Guards retract back up the ramp. They go inside the shuttle. The ramp does not close. But they are gone. This moment, Anakin files. The guard sent away for a private reunion, the father wanting a moment alone with his son. Palpatine descends. His robe is clean, dark, layered, the specific cut of something designed to communicate gravitas without ostentation, the costume of a man who has spent 60 years learning that the performance of humility is more effective than the performance of power. He moves without urgency, each step deliberate and unhurried, and his hands are visible at his sides, and his expression, as he reaches the platform's surface and raises his eyes, is warm. genuinely warm. This is the thing that Anakin, in the original timeline, had never been able to account for, the thing that made every warning about Palpatine feel like jealousy or politics or Jedi rigidity. The warmth looked real because some part of it was. Palpatine's interest in Anakin Skywalker had been, in its own way, genuine. The investment, the attention, the specific pleasure of watching something develop according to plan. The warmth was real. It was just not what it appeared to be. Anakin watches it arrive now and names it accurately and says nothing. The face. He can see the damage beneath the recent reconstruction. The work is skilled. The surface presentation is intact. But Anakin knows this face in its post-lightning state from 20 years of proximity, and the knowledge of what lives under the cosmetics is legible to him the same way a poorly translated text is legible to someone who knows the original language. Mace's saber did that. The deflected lightning did that. A man nearly 70 years old ran a performance so precisely calibrated that he turned his own genuine physical damage into a tool and used it to break a 22-year-old in 30 seconds. He looks at Palpatine's reconstructed face and feels nothing that requires management. "My boy," Palpatine says, and his voice carries the specific inflection of relief, not the theatrical relief of someone performing it, the quieter relief of someone who has been concerned and is now seeing the concern resolved. He has covered 50 meters of platform, and he stops at a respectful distance, close enough for intimacy, far enough to signal that he is not making demands. "I came as quickly as I could. Are you?" He pauses. The pause is scripted, a beat of visible parental assessment running Anakin up and down for signs of damage, communicating through its own duration that whatever Anakin has been through matters enormously to the person conducting this assessment. "You completed the mission," he says. The warmth shifts into something that functions as pride. "I knew you would. I never doubted it." Anakin says nothing. Palpatine moves closer, unhurried, the natural closing of a distance between two people in the same conversation. "Together," he says, "we can begin to restore what's been lost. The Republic has been failing for years. We both know this. What you've helped us achieve," he pauses again. The us. Deliberate, including Anakin in the ownership of what has been done, so that the weight of it becomes shared, so that the logic of what comes next feels like continuation rather than conscription. What we've achieved creates an opportunity. For order. For something that actually works, instead of the corruption and the endless, he stops. It is not a scripted stop. The pauses before were architecture. This one is different. He has come close enough now that the force exchange between them is direct and immediate, and what he has reached out to probe, not aggressively, barely a touch, the lightest possible extension of awareness in the way that someone with 60 years of practice can make it feel like nothing, is not what he expected to find. He expected the jagged, burning signature of a newly converted Sith apprentice, the raw, bleeding quality of someone who has crossed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. He has felt this before. He knows its texture. He built the conditions that produce it. What he touches is something else. Something that has the depth of decades. Something that has been through the dark side and out the other side of it and carries the knowledge without the hunger. The warmth does not leave his face. He is too practiced for that. But something else leaves it. Something beneath the warmth. Some quality of certainty. The subtle assurance of a man who knows exactly where he is standing. He is very still. A predator, Anakin thinks. In the specific moment it realizes it has not walked into the room it thought it was walking into. "You've changed," Palpatine says. "Yes," Anakin says. Palpatine's right hand begins to move. Palpatine's right hand completes its movement. The crimson blade ignites. The sound of it in Mustafar's atmosphere is fractionally wrong. The sulfur and particulate alter the frequency, give it a rougher edge than it would have anywhere else, as if even the lightsaber knows where it has been brought. His grip is one-handed, the hilt long and thin, built for a duelist who never intended to share a fight, his posture communicating nothing about what's coming, because Palpatine's posture never communicated anything he hadn't chosen to communicate first. He doesn't speak. He moves. The contrast surfaces in the space between one heartbeat and the next, not a scene, just a sensation. The specific texture of Mace Windu's wrist under his fingers, the way the Jedi Master's arm had been straining, the corded muscle beneath the robe, and how Anakin's hand had closed around it and stopped the killing blow, and in that single physical act had signed the death warrant for 10,000 people. Just a hand, just a grip. A choice made in 2 seconds that cost decades. He releases it. The platform is here. The wind is here. The Ataru opening comes exactly as he knew it would, the rapid diagonal approach with the step-change feint that relocates center of mass without telegraphing direction, driving into an overhead arc designed to clear Anakin's guard and descend on the left shoulder. It is elegant. It has killed Jedi who had trained their entire lives against it, because at the apex of the arc Palpatine's velocity and the Juyo current running beneath the Form 4 geometry create a combined pressure that saturates a defender's decision cycle before it can complete. Against a 22-year-old Anakin Skywalker, even a good one, it would have worked. Veteran Anakin steps back and left. He does not engage the overhead. He lets the trajectory commit. In the same motion, his left hand extends toward the platform railing, and he fires a force push, not at Palpatine, at the railing itself, 3 meters of durasteel support structure torn from its anchor points and sent lateral and upward into the landing position. Palpatine deflects it. Fast, reflexive, clean, but deflecting it costs him the landing angle and the attack and the initiative, and for a fraction of a second the most dangerous combatant in the galaxy stands on a Mustafar platform with his approach disrupted and his opening sequence unresolved. And that fraction of a second is the whole answer. The speed test begins. Palpatine comes again, adjusting, Form 4-4 velocity in full, the multi-directional attack geometry that is designed to be everywhere at once, to occupy more of the defender's visual and force perceptual field than a single attacker has any right to occupy. He is fast. Anakin knew he would be fast, and fast still means something when you are standing in front of it. The Juyo current underneath the movements generates a dark side pressure that pushes against Anakin's concentration the way a strong wind pushes against a door, consistently, insistently, asking what's on the other side. He doesn't push back. He absorbs. This is what 23 years in a suit teaches, if it teaches nothing else: patience inside pressure. He is slower than Palpatine in this phase, and he is slower deliberately, letting the older man expend force reserve on combinations that land against empty air and redirected angles, giving him nothing to calculate against, denying him the aggressive forward commitment that Gemso wants to make and that Palpatine is counting on finding. 3 exchanges. 4. Palpatine is not tiring, he is too disciplined to tire visibly, but he is spending. Anakin can feel the expenditure the way you feel the temperature of a fire when you're near it without touching it. He waits. Then, both of Palpatine's hands come up. He moves left, immediately, not bracing, not raising a blade to absorb, lateral, fast. The direction the lightning isn't expecting because the lightning's targeting logic is built on an opponent's instinct to stand ground and resist. The bolt tracks. It finds the platform surface 6 inches from his right heel, and the durasteel there goes molten in less than a second, running orange into the grating gaps, and dropping toward the channel below in heavy, bright drops. Close, he is inside Palpatine's guard before the channel collapses and the saber comes back up. They both know the score now. He can see it in the precise economy of Palpatine's next defensive posture, the shift from offensive geometry to something more considered, more controlled. This is not what he expected to find. This was supposed to be a broken boy standing over his first kills. Grateful and compliant and ready to be shaped. What he has found instead is something he has no framework for, and Palpatine, for all his centuries of planning, does not improvise as well as he prepares. The third phase begins differently. Palpatine says, Padmé. Just the name. Nothing attached to it. He says it the way a field medic probes a wound, not to communicate, but to locate. To find where the tissue is still responsive. Where the nerve still fires. Anakin's response is silence. He moves into a gemso bind, two-handed, catching Palpatine's blade in a crossing grip that uses the bind's geometry to rotate the point of contact through a quarter arc, leveraging at the wrist joint, using the opponent's own grip strength against the angle until the grip becomes the problem rather than the solution. It requires precision. It requires a knowledge of the exact degree of rotation that exceeds what should be possible to know without doing it many times, in many fights, across many years. Palpatine's saber rotates out of his grip. It falls. It doesn't reach the platform. The Force catches it before it does. Of course it does. He expected it to. The recovery move requires both hands for a fraction of a second, and the fraction of a second is all he needed. The opening is there. Palpatine is at the platform's edge now, the railing gone from the earlier exchange, nothing between him and the thermal drop to the channel below. His options have contracted to the point where they are no longer options, just responses. He makes the one that has the most surface area, both hands up, wide field force lightning, the variant that sacrifices precision for coverage, filling the space between them with ionized air and raw dark side electrical force, because if you cannot be accurate, you can be everywhere. Anakin raises his saber in a two-handed grip. The technique is real. He learned it years after it would have been useful, years into the Empire, studying records of combatants who had survived Sith lightning long enough to develop responses to it. He learned it alone, in whatever space the suit allowed for learning anything, because knowing how to cut through an electrical force channel was the kind of knowledge Vader might one day need and Palpatine would never have taught him. He cuts through the channel. The lightning splits, dissipates, the platform's surface where it grounded chars and pits, but nothing else happens. And then, nothing else happens for a moment longer, and in that moment, the fight is over. It ends there. He stands on the platform. He is tired. Not the exhaustion of physical effort. His body, 22 years old and fully intact, has reserves he has not needed yet. Something deeper. The particular, bone-level exhaustion of having done something that needed doing for a very long time, and having done it, and now standing in the space where the thing used to be. There is no satisfaction. He had not expected satisfaction, and he is not surprised by its absence, but he takes a moment to confirm the absence, to look directly at it, and register what's actually there instead of what the story demands should be there. What's there is tired. What's there is the quiet of the platform now that the fight's frequency is gone. What's there is the wind, still pushing from the south. He reaches out to the Force. It is still here. Clean in a way it has not been for 23 years. No, longer than that. Because the last years before Mustafar the darkness was already encroaching, the choices already eroding the clarity. Clean in the way water is clean after a filter works the way it was designed to work. Quiet. Not empty. Just quiet. He stands in it for a moment. Then he collects Palpatine's lightsaber from where it fell. He holds it briefly, the thin elegant hilt, the ancient construction, the crystal inside it that has seen 60 years of history he was not present for and will not see the rest of. He clips it to his belt. Proof, if proof is eventually required. Currency in a galaxy about to need new currencies. He boards the shuttle. The Red Guards are at the top of the ramp. They see him. They see the lightsaber on his belt that isn't his. They are professionals, and professionals read situations, and the situation they are reading resolves, in their body language. Into a single decision, they step aside. He sits at the navigation console. The system is encrypted, layers of it. The kind of encryption that reflects a man who trusted no one and built his security architecture accordingly. He works through it. He has time. He has the patience of someone who has been waiting to do this for 2 decades. The nav memory opens. He copies it. All of it. Every destination Palpatine personally visited. The unknown region's coordinates he doesn't recognize yet, but files carefully for when he does. The frequencies. The emergency contacts. The contingency locations. He pulls the data. He powers down the console. He goes down the ramp and across the platform and through the facility door, past the conference room with its silent evidence of completed work, and finds Obi-Wan in the corridor on the other side. Obi-Wan looks at the second lightsaber on his belt. He doesn't ask. He already knows. We have work to do, Anakin says. The conference room smells of ozone and metal and the specific chemistry of cooling cauterized wounds. The Separatist Council is exactly as he left them, arranged around the long table in the positions their deaths assigned them. He doesn't look at them directly, they are documentation. He walks past them to the facility's primary communication terminal and begins working. Obi-Wan stands in the doorway. Padmé finds a wall and puts her back to it. Nobody sits. "What do we have?" Obi-Wan says. Not a question. A request for a briefing. Anakin doesn't stop working the terminal while he talks. "The shuttle," he says. "Encrypted command channels and nav memory. I pulled the memory already. Full record of every destination Palpatine personally visited, including coordinates I don't have names for yet in the unknown regions. We hold that data and we tell no one about it until we understand what it contains." He moves to the next item. His lightsaber. Physical proof of termination if it becomes politically necessary to demonstrate that he's gone and not coming back. He moves to the next. The Council. A brief indication of the room they're standing in. Documentation that the Confederacy was dissolved at the military level before the transition of power occurred. That matters for how we present what happened here to systems that were about to join the Separatists. The war ended because the Separatist leadership was eliminated, not because a new regime imposed itself. Those are two different stories, and only one of them prevents 15 systems from deciding they have no reason to cooperate with whatever comes next. Obi-Wan says, "And the clones." "That's the problem," Anakin says, "and we address it in the next 40 minutes. He finds the channel interface in the communication suite. The system is built for Palpatine's use, which means it routes through Imperial military relays at Priority 1 classification. A signal originating here, from this console, on this frequency, would arrive at its destination looking like a direct transmission from the Chancellor's office. This is not a feature Palpatine installed for Anakin's benefit. It is a feature Anakin is going to use anyway. He keys Rex's personal encrypted channel from memory. 23 years of memory. He used this channel dozens of times in another life, both to give orders and, in the years after the Purge, in a different capacity entirely, surveillance, tracking, ensuring that the man who'd had his chip removed stayed where he could be monitored. He remembers the frequency the way he remembers everything from that life, with the perfect, slightly nauseating clarity of knowledge that was purchased at a cost he is still accounting for. The channel opens, static first. Then the background sound of a place that is not a functioning military installation, wind, and at a lower register. The kind of quiet that follows something that made a great deal of noise recently. The specific silence of a crash site, or something near one. "This is an authenticated priority channel," Rex says. His voice is flat and professional and monitoring every variable in the transmission simultaneously. "Identify." "It's Skywalker." A pause. 4 seconds. In 4 seconds, Rex runs every test available to him without equipment. The voice, the frequency authentication, the fact that this transmission is routing through Chancellor priority relays, and whatever the Force-adjacent soldier's intuition of a man who has fought beside someone for years tells him when he hears that voice again. "General," Rex says. One word. The tone of a man whose world has been rearranged and who is, out of long professional habit, keeping it out of his face even on an audio channel. "You're with Ahsoka," Anakin says. Another pause. "Sir." "She made it." He says it as a statement, not a question. Because he already knows, but saying it out loud is something different than knowing it. Order 66 was a chip-triggered operation. It originated with the Chancellor. The Chancellor is dead. He lets that land. "Whoever is with you, they go to ground now, and they stay there until you hear from me on this frequency. I'll use a signal you'll recognize when it comes. Can you secure your position?" "Yes, sir." "Don't contact the temple. Don't contact any Republic military frequency. The command structure is compromised at every level until I say otherwise." "Understood." A beat. "General." "Are you?" Rex stops. Restarts. "Is it over?" "The part that was going to kill all of you," Anakin says, is over. He closes the channel. He does not ask to speak to Ahsoka. That conversation requires more than a secure comlink and 40 minutes of operational window. He files it for later with the same discipline he files everything for later, and he moves on. The broadcast architecture is already open on the terminal. He works through it in sections, and the work is precise enough to require full attention, which is useful because full attention means he is not thinking about the list of names that is already assembling itself in the back of his mind. The counter signal first. Palpatine's command codes give him access to the chip activation frequency, a biometric keyed standing order that has been running for hours now across every theater the clone military touches. He cannot deactivate the chips. The hardware is physical, installed, and removing it requires surgery. What he can do is flood the activation frequency with a Chancellor priority interrupt that degrades the standing trigger signal. Some chips will continue to function. The clones they're embedded in will continue to execute. But the clean, coordinated kill will become something ragged, something that gaps and misfires, something that Jedi who are still alive might have enough time to sense and run from. He transmits it, watches the system confirm delivery through the relay network. Second, transmission lockdown for the major clone command centers. 2 hours. Using Palpatine's authentication, he pushes a communications blackout order through the military relays, classified as a security protocol, originating from the Chancellor's personal authorization, routing restriction on all outbound coordination frequencies for 120 minutes. It will look like a security measure. By the time anyone figures out it isn't, the 2 hours will have been spent. Third, the routing metadata. He ensures that every transmission he has sent in the last 20 minutes identifies its origin point as the Chancellor's personal shuttle on Mustafar. He wants someone on Coruscant, within the hour, asking what the Chancellor was doing at the Separatist Council execution site when these transmissions originated. He closes the console. The silence in the conference room after the communications work ends has a different texture than the silence before it. Heavier, more specific. He turns from the terminal and Obi-Wan is watching him, and Padmé is watching him, and neither of them says anything, because neither of them knows yet what the silence contains. He sits down at the conference table for the first time, not in one of the seats near the council's dead, further along, near the end. He pulls up the information he has about survivors, what he knows, what he can verify, what is already beyond reach. Luminara Unduli, he says. She would have been captured, not killed. They were using her as bait, holding her alive to draw in other survivors. She's in transit to a containment facility right now, or she will be within hours. He stops. We don't have a ship that can intercept the transport in the window we have. I don't know which transport. I know the destination facility, but not the route. He stops again. She goes on the list of what we couldn't prevent. Obi-Wan is still. What list? The one I've been keeping since this morning, Anakin says. The names I already know are gone. He moves on. Caleb Doom. Padawan, 14 years old. His master was Deepa Bilaba, she's dead. The clones would have hit her first. He's running somewhere in the Outer Rim right now. I know his name because... He stops. The reason he knows the name is not something he is ready to explain in full. I know his name. I don't know the planet. Finding him requires resources we don't have from this location. What resources? Obi-Wan says. A network. People in the Outer Rim who can run a search without alerting Imperial Remnant Command. Which means we need to move. And we need allies. And neither of those things happens from Mustafar. Obi-Wan nods. Then he says something that costs him something to say, visible in the way he chooses the words. In the original timeline. After the temple. He pauses. I went back. I reset the beacon, the emergency recall signal, to warn survivors away. But before I did, I looked. His voice is flat and careful. There were more of them than you knew. Than Vader knew. The ones who made it into the lower levels. 7, possibly 8, in the sub-level maintenance corridors. I don't know if they survived what came after, but they were alive when I was there. Anakin looks at him. This is the first thing he has heard today that he did not already know. He sits with it for a moment. The weight of it is specific and strange, not grief exactly, but a crack in the certainty he arrived with, the reminder that 23 years of memory is not a complete record, that the original timeline had corners he never saw into, that there are things still to discover about how much was lost and how much was not. He nods. Then the temple is our first stop, he says. Not the main entrance, the lower access. If they're still there, we reach them before anyone starts a sweep. Padmé says, I can get a message to Bail Organa. She says it the way she says everything today, flat, steady, without asking for anything in return, in the voice of someone who identified the lever she could pull and pulled it before announcing she was doing so. He looks at her across the table and for the first time today sees her clearly, not as the ghost of what he failed to protect, not as the person whose death built a monster, but as the specific and formidable human being who has been fighting this war in its political dimension for years, with the same quiet competence she is applying right now. He nods. Tell him we need the Senate chambers sealed, he says, and tell him the Chancellor won't be returning. Coruscant from a landing approach looks the same as it always has, which is the first wrong thing. The city planet doesn't know yet. The light grid is functioning. Traffic lanes are open. The civilian networks are running their standard load. From altitude, nothing has changed, and that absence of visible catastrophe is its own kind of horror, that the worst day in Jedi history is happening down inside all of that ordinary light without the light knowing. They land at a private senatorial dock on the upper residential ring. Padmé's clearance. The dock attendant sees the ship ID, sees nothing wrong with it, and waves them through. Because nothing on the surface layer of this city has registered yet what is moving beneath it. On the transit level 1 ring down, there are clone formations at 4 intersections that shouldn't have clone formations. He counts them through the viewport as Padmé's pilot brings them in. Their positioning is not tactical. It is the positioning of a unit that received an order and executed it and is now waiting for the next order that hasn't come, standing still in a pattern that was designed for movement. Their command architecture is headless, and they are professional enough to hold position until it isn't. It looks less like a coup than like the aftermath of one. Organizations mid-motion with nothing left to coordinate them. He knows this specific quality of disruption. He caused it once, from the other direction. He and Obi-Wan leave separately from Padmé at the dock. She has her network and she is already using it, and the most valuable thing she can do for the next 2 hours is not be visible in his company. They agree to this without discussing it. She understands operational logic. She always has. The temple is 7 minutes on foot through service passages that predate the current city layer by several centuries. He doesn't take the surface route. They come up through a maintenance access point in the sub-level, a passage cut through cooled geological stratum that the temple's original architects used for utility routing before the surrounding cityscape built itself up around the base. It is 1.5 meters wide and smells of recycled air and old stone and something electrical in the walls. He has known this passage since he was 9 years old. Obi-Wan knows it too. He can tell by the way Obi-Wan moves through it, not orienting, just moving, the ease of someone navigating from memory rather than attention. Neither of them says why they're not using the main entrance. They don't need to. There is only one reason to avoid the front of the Jedi Temple when approaching it from the outside, and it is the same reason he is not using the name Vader, and it is the same reason Obi-Wan has not asked him how he knows this passage in the specific dark of a sub-level where no one would overhear the answer. The passage opens into the lower maintenance corridor system. Stone floors, service lighting on the walls at knee height, the particular texture of a space that was built to function and not to be seen. He stops at the junction and extends his awareness into the structure above them. Upper levels, clone signatures, 8 or 9 of them, stationed in the main corridors. Their force presence is the flat, regular quality of men following instructions rather than men in active engagement, holding, not hunting. They are waiting for orders that the broadcast interruption has delayed. He estimates 90 minutes before someone on the command chain thinks to wonder why no confirmation has come from this location and sends a secondary sweep. Lower levels, nothing that belongs to the clones. 7 signatures. Human and near-human, all of them compressed into a cluster 200 meters down the left-hand corridor in what his memory identifies as the old initiate's dormitory wing, the space that was decommissioned and repurposed as archive storage 3 years ago, before the war stretched the temple's residential capacity past its original planning. The Force signatures are alive, frightened, quiet in the specific way of people who have been quiet for hours because noise would kill them. He nods to Obi-Wan. They move. The dormitory wing's door is sealed from the inside with a force hold, not a lock, but a sustained telekinetic pressure against the handle, requiring continuous attention. Whoever is holding it has been holding it for hours and is tired. The hold is starting to slip. He doesn't try to open it. He speaks instead, low, close to the door's edge. "This is Obi-Wan Kenobi," Obi-Wan says beside him, "and Anakin Skywalker. We are not followed. Open the door." The hold releases. The door opens. 7 of them. 4 he places immediately, a pair of young knights, both human in their mid-20s, who he doesn't know from the original timeline because they were never part of any operation he ran. A Padawan, Togrutan, maybe 16, her Letku pressed against the wall behind her and her eyes, doing the rapid threat assessment of someone who has been in fight-or-flight response long enough for it to be wearing out its edges. An older knight, female, Mirialisi, with a cut above her left eyebrow that has been closed with a field technique but needs proper attention. The other 3 are further back in the room, 2 more young knights who keep their faces in the shadow, and 1 master. She is sitting against the far wall with her knees drawn up and her lightsaber across them and her eyes already on the door when it opens. He knows her. He knows her name and her fighting style and the specific way she voted on 3 separate council motions and the record of what happened to her students in the original timeline, some of them, the ones he can account for. He did not know she was in the temple tonight. The original timeline's record of her is a gap, not killed in the purge, not listed among confirmed survivors, just absent from the record in the way that people become absent when no one is left to document what happened to them. She is alive. In this version, she is alive, and she is looking at him with the careful, measuring quality of a master who has had hours alone to think. He doesn't address her first, he addresses the room. "The man who ordered this is dead," he says, not loudly. The space is small, and they are all close enough that volume is not the tool. Chancellor Palpatine was Darth Sidious. He ran both sides of this war. I killed him on Mustafar 2 hours ago. The Separatist Council is dissolved. The clone order that was activated today was a chip-triggered sequence that originated in his office. We have broadcast a counter-signal and interrupted the command coordination. He pauses. The war is over. The immediate threat to this location is a secondary sweep that will come in approximately 90 minutes if we don't move before then. The silence that follows is not disbelief. It is the silence of 7 people processing information that rewrites the shape of everything they thought was fixed, the shape of the threat, the shape of what survival looks like from here, the shape of tomorrow, which none of them had been certain existed an hour ago. Then the young knight moves. He is in his late 20s, fair-haired, with the careful stance of someone who trained in Ceresu and has the form's patience without yet having its depth. He doesn't know this man. He has no record of him, no memory of his name or his history or the specific missions he ran. But he knows the posture, someone too frightened to stay still and trained well enough to channel the fear into action. The saber ignites. Blue, the blade comes up to a guard position, not raised for a strike but present enough to be a question. "Who are you?" the knight says, "and why should we trust anything you're telling us?" It is a reasonable question. It is the right question. Under the circumstances, it is exactly the question a functioning Jedi should be asking, and Anakin knows this, registers it clearly, knows it is correct, and he feels the response forming in himself before he makes any conscious decision about it. A force, pressure, a deliberate outward radiating of authority, not the light side quality of presence that Yoda commanded, not Mace's careful projection of institutional weight, but something colder and more direct. The specific kind of compulsion that says lower that blade and do it now in a register that bypasses thought entirely and addresses something more fundamental. He has used it 10,000 times. It is efficient. It ends confrontations before they develop, and it works on almost everyone, because it is built from decades of being the most dangerous thing in any room he entered. He catches it before it deploys. He takes one step back. He holds both hands up, open, palms toward the night. He waits. 3 seconds. The night is watching him with the saber still up, and his eyes doing the work of someone trying to find the seam in a performance that doesn't have one. Then, Obi-Wan says something quiet and specific beside him, not loud enough to hear clearly. Pitched for the night alone, and the blade lowers. The knight steps back. The moment passes. Anakin lowers his hands. He does not look at Obi-Wan. He looks at the floor of the dormitory for a moment and breathes in the recycled air of the lower temple and breathes it out again. He noticed what he almost did. He noticed how fast it formed and how natural it felt and how effortlessly it would have deployed if he had let it. He files this, the way he files everything that requires attention later, in the list of things he is still accounting for. He looks up. "We have 80 minutes, he says. "We need to move." Rex is waiting at the junction of Sublevel 7 and the maintenance ring, standing in the specific quality of stillness that belongs to soldiers who learned patience in places that punished movement. He is alone. Anakin notes this, that he came alone, that he positioned himself where the corridor split gives him sight lines in 3 directions, and files it as Rex being Rex, which is to say being the best at what he does. They see each other across 20 meters of service passage. Rex looks at him the way he has seen people look at the sight of a fire after it's out, taking inventory, confirming what remains and what doesn't. There is relief in it, and underneath the relief something more careful, the specific watchfulness of a man who knows the person in front of him and is noticing, cataloging. That something about the fit is wrong. Not wrong badly, wrong in the way a familiar instrument sounds when it's been retuned. He doesn't say any of this. He crosses the 20 meters and he says, "General, good to see you alive." "And you," Anakin says. He means it in ways Rex cannot know, and he does not try to explain them. How many troopers between here and the Senate District? 200, give or take. Mostly 501st, some Coruscant garrison. The stand-down broadcast interrupted the sweep pattern. They're holding positions they were assigned 3 hours ago and waiting for coordination that isn't coming. Rex's jaw tightens slightly. A few of them are in bad shape. The trigger activated, and then the counter signal hit while it was still running. They're disoriented. "The chips," Anakin says. "Yes, sir. They are not responsible." He says it as an operational statement, not a comfort. What they did, whatever they did today, was done with hardware in their brains that was designed specifically to remove their ability to choose. That is the factual situation. I need you to hold on to that fact for the next hour because it's going to matter for what I'm asking you to do. Rex looks at him steadily. He is listening the way soldiers listen when the briefing is the difference between a mission and a catastrophe. "I can get through to some of them," Anakin says, "between transmissions. Windows where the chip coordination is interrupted and their own minds have a few seconds of access. In those windows I can force a sleep state, applied through direct contact when I can close distance, through concentrated effort when I can't. It requires proximity and patience, and it will take longer than any other option." He pauses. "I need you on communications, creating the windows, talking to them directly, their frequency, your voice, because your voice is something the chip was not designed to override." Rex says, "Some of them will fight anyway." "I know. The trigger is still live in most of them. My voice interrupts it, but it doesn't remove it. And if a trooper in active trigger state gets close enough to engage before you can." "I know," Anakin says. "I'm not asking you to control them. I'm asking you to help me not kill them." Rex looks at him for a moment. Something in the look is not purely tactical. Then he nods. "Tell me the sectors," he says. "The first corridor takes 40 minutes. The technique works through contact when possible, both hands pressed against chest plate or helmet. The force pushed directly through the point of contact to overwhelm the nervous system's conscious layer, forcing a sleep state without damage. When distance prevents it, he applies concentrated effort at range, slower, more demanding, requiring the kind of precision that doesn't allow for divided attention. It is like performing surgery while running. He manages one, sometimes two at range per window before Rex's interference frequency closes, and the next chip trigger cycle begins, and he has to pull back and wait. Rex works the comlink. His voice carries the specific quality of 20 years of command, calm, familiar, the voice of someone these men's genetics were grown to trust. It creates 4-5 seconds of hesitation in troopers, whose chips are caught in mid-activation, enough time for Anakin to cover the distance and apply the technique through direct contact before the trigger completes. Not always enough. Twice in the first corridor it isn't enough, and the fighting is brief and precise and cold, in the way that fighting becomes cold when the goal is to contain rather than defeat, when every movement is calibrated to incapacitate without ending. He catches a blaster bolt on his saber. Obi-Wan handles a trooper who comes from the left at an angle neither of them was tracking. Nobody dies in the first corridor. By the second corridor he is sweating in a way that has nothing to do with the temperature. The contrast surfaces mid-movement, between one sector and the next. Not a memory he chose, just the physical register of the floor underfoot, durasteel grating the same grade as the temple's maintenance level, and the sound of armor moving through a similar space. And then, the specific quality of what that sound felt like when it was coming from behind him instead of in front. The 501st following orders that bore his authority, the march entering the temple's main entrance. He had not counted the people inside. He had known there were people inside. He had given the order and walked ahead of the march, and the sound of it had followed him like a tide. He releases it. The second corridor is in front of him. They work through it in sectors. Halfway down the third corridor, a trooper sees him from 20 meters and stops. The chip is firing. He can feel it in the force, the activation sequence running, the spike of something artificial overriding the man's own will, the specific quality of a person fighting a war inside their own head that they don't know how to name. The trooper's hand goes to his weapon. His body posture changes. His head comes up and tracks toward Anakin the way a targeting system tracks, and his hand is on the blaster, and he is bringing it level and... He stops. He looks at Anakin directly. Whatever the chip is doing, some layer underneath it is doing something else, and the two things are in conflict, and the conflict produces something he is not expected to see. Recognition. Simple, human, direct. General Skywalker, the trooper says. In a voice that sounds almost surprised, in a voice that sounds like a man surfacing. He is already moving. He covers the 20 meters faster than the chip can complete its sequence, and he places both hands, one flesh, one durasteel, against the trooper's chest plate and pushes the sleep state through the contact point directly. Contact is faster. Contact is more precise. He needs it to be both. The trooper's legs give. He catches him before he hits the floor. He lowers him down, turns him onto his back, and settles him against the corridor wall with the care of someone arranging something that matters. He kneels there for a moment. He puts one hand flat on the armor plate above the man's chest. The durasteel conducts the vibration clearly. Slow, regular, present, a heartbeat. Underneath the blue armor and the standard-issue bodysuit, and the hardware embedded at the base of his skull, is a man who woke up this morning and made his bunk and checked his gear, and had breakfast in a mess hall, and then had his mind taken from him at a frequency he couldn't detect. In the original timeline, this unit marched into the Jedi Temple and did what they were built to do. He does not say this out loud. He does not say anything at all. He stays kneeling on the floor of a Coruscant service corridor, with his hand on a stranger's chest, feeling the proof of life move through metal, and the silence does what silence does when you let it. Then, he stands. The third corridor is clear. The fourth and fifth take another 40 minutes, sector by sector, Rex's voice and Anakin's hands, and Obi-Wan managing the angles. When it is done, Anakin is sitting on the floor of the final corridor with his back against the wall and his arms across his knees, surrounded by sleeping men in blue and white armor, arranged in the positions gravity assigned them when their legs stopped working. 200 of them, approximately. He is very tired. Not the physical exhaustion of a young body pushed past its limits. The deeper tiredness. The specific weight of attention paid at full concentration for 3 hours to the problem of keeping specific people alive. Obi-Wan comes and stands near him. He looks at the corridor for a moment. Then, he looks at Anakin. "You knew them," he says. Not a question. In another life. "Yes," Anakin says. Obi-Wan is quiet for a moment. "How many of them?" Anakin looks at the corridor. The blue armor, the white armor, the helmet markings, the specific unit designation painted on the shoulder plates of the nearest trooper. Men he commanded for 3 years, men he led into a temple and gave an order he cannot take back in any timeline except the one he is building now, corridor by corridor, one sleeping soldier at a time. "All of them," he says. "I knew all of them." The safe house is 3 levels below the senatorial district, in a residential block that Padmé's network maintains under a civilian lease. It has 6 rooms, 2 exits, and a communication suite that Bail Organa's people installed during the war for reasons that were never written down. It is functional and anonymous, and, for the last 3 days, it has been the operational center of everything. He notices the first incident on the morning of the second day. Padmé is coordinating with a senator whose support Bail needs for the emergency governance framework, a woman whose political instincts are good, but whose personal caution is outpacing the situation, who keeps finding reasons why committing now is premature and why waiting for cleaner information would be prudent. Anakin listens to her from across the room while he works on something else. He is not part of that conversation. He is 2 minutes into composing a detailed calculation of how a single targeted display of force ability in this woman's presence would end her hesitation permanently. Not violence, just presence. Just the specific kind of authority that the Force can project when the person projecting it has 23 years of practice making rooms understand what they are in the presence of. He has it fully mapped, the approach, the timing, the specific gesture, the expected response, before he realizes he has been calculating it at all. He puts his work down. He finds a different wall to face, and he breathes for a minute. The woman eventually commits, through Padmé's patience, because that is how people are actually persuaded. He watches this happen and says nothing. The second incident occurs on the afternoon of the 3rd day. One of the surviving masters, the woman from the dormitory wing, whose name he knows and has not used, disagrees with his proposed timeline for contacting the Outer Rim cells. She disagrees loudly, with the particular authority of someone who has been waiting for 3 days to be consulted and has had enough of being managed. It is a legitimate disagreement. Her reasoning has merit. She is not wrong. He is mid-response when it happens. Not a decision. Just a flare, outward, radiating. The Force carrying the specific quality of this conversation is concluded in a register that doesn't ask for cooperation, that addresses something below the level of conscious consent. The Master takes 1 step back, involuntary, her own body responding to a signal it didn't choose to receive. She catches herself. Her expression does something complicated. He stops talking. He corrects the response. He listens to her reasoning, and he adjusts the timeline accordingly, because she is right, and he knew she was right before the flare happened. Nobody says anything about it. But she notices. He noticed that she noticed. They both file it in the category of things that are true and have not yet been addressed. The third incident happens the same evening, at the communication terminal. He is working through an intelligence cache recovered from a clone command center, names, locations, status reports, the administrative record of Order 66 still being compiled in real time by a machine that nobody has shut down yet. He is cross-referencing it against what he knows, building a picture of who might still be reachable. He moves through the list with efficiency, name by name. Then, he finds a name he knows. He has complicated history with this person. Not in this timeline. In this timeline, the history is limited to council meetings and operational briefings, and the general context of years spent in the same institution. But in the original timeline, this person had a trajectory that passed through Vader's specific awareness once, and then didn't, and the reason it stopped was not because they survived. His first instinct, before he can name it, before any conscious process weighs in on it, is to determine whether the name on this list represents an asset or a liability. Not, are they alive? Not, can they be reached? Asset or liability? He sits with that for 3 seconds. Then he puts the datapad down on the table, and he stands up, and he goes outside. The building's exterior access is a maintenance door onto a fire platform that overlooks 3 levels of Coruscant mid-ring. The city runs its lights below and above, and in every direction. And the noise of it is constant and layered and completely indifferent. He leans against the railing and breathes the recycled outdoor air and does not think about anything for a moment. Then, Obi-Wan comes through the door behind him. He doesn't turn around. He hears Obi-Wan settle into the space beside him on the railing, close enough for a private conversation, far enough to be giving him room. He hears the particular quality of someone choosing their words carefully. "I've been watching you lead for 3 days," Obi-Wan says. Not an accusation, an observation in the register of a man reporting what he has seen. "You are very effective." A pause, and you are completely alone in a room full of people who are trying to work with you. He says nothing. "You've already decided what everyone around you is worth," Obi-Wan says. "What they can do. What they cost. What losing them would mean to the operational picture. I've watched you calculate it in real time for people who are talking to you and thinking you're listening." He pauses again. "You did this before." "Yes," Anakin says. "In the life you came from. Yes." Obi-Wan is quiet for a moment. The city moves below them without comment. Then, did it work? He thinks about 23 years. He thinks about the list of what he is still accounting for, and how long that list is, and that he has been adding to it since the morning he opened his eyes on Mustafar. He thinks about what working would have meant, in that life, and whether there was ever a version of it where it did. "No," he says, "it didn't." Obi-Wan nods. He doesn't follow it with a lesson. He doesn't offer the thing that this conversation, in another version, would have made him offer, a framework, a principle, the distilled wisdom of the Jedi tradition applied to a specific failure. He just stands there on the fire platform with his arms folded against the recycled wind and lets the answer exist without fixing it. It is, Anakin thinks, the most useful thing he could have done. After a while, Obi-Wan goes inside. Ahsoka arrives 20 minutes later. She comes through the maintenance door without knocking. She is wearing civilian clothes that fit wrong, as if they belong to someone with a different relationship to the concept of a non-combat wardrobe. Her eyes find him immediately, and she crosses the platform, and she looks at his face in the ambient light from the city below. "You look old," she says. He almost laughs. It comes up from somewhere genuine and catches him before he can route it through the usual management, and for a moment, the first real moment in 4 days, something in him is just here, and just this, and just slightly less alone than he has been. "Rex said you'd be here," he says. Rex says a lot of things. She settles against the railing beside him with the particular ease of someone who spent years learning how to be comfortable in uncomfortable places. She doesn't ask him the things Obi-Wan asked. She is already past those questions, already somewhere further along in the conversation that she clearly started without him. "He told me what you've been doing." The corridor by corridor. The sedated, not dead. He nods. "I need you to know," she says, "that I've spent 4 days being very deliberately not in the same place as you, and I did that on purpose, because I needed to watch what you do when I'm not there. Before, I decided what to think." He turns to look at her. "You're good," she says. It is not a compliment in the way compliments are usually constructed. It is an assessment, delivered with the flat quality of someone who reached a conclusion they're not sure they're glad about. "Better than I've ever seen you. Calmer, more precise. The decisions you're making, Anakin, they're the right decisions. I can see that. Everyone can see that." She pauses. "That's what scares me." He waits. "You used to make bad decisions because you were afraid," she says. "Because something mattered too much, and you couldn't handle how much it mattered, and the fear of losing it made you do things that didn't make sense. That was the problem with you. That was always the specific problem." A beat. "Now you make good decisions because you've stopped caring whether you're afraid. Like fear is just another variable you manage. Like everything is just variables you manage." She looks at him steadily. "That's not the same as being okay. That's not even close to the same thing." He doesn't answer. He doesn't have an answer. He turns back to the city below, and the city offers nothing useful, and Ahsoka stays where she is beside him, having said what she came to say. Letting him sit in the space it opened. He sits in it. The shuttle's secured compartments yielded on the 18th hour. They searched the nav memory first, encrypted, layered, the kind of architecture that reflects a man who trusted no one and built his security accordingly. Barra and the senior Padawan worked through it, in rotating shifts, while Anakin slept for the first time in 4 days. The nav memory contained coordinates, routes, emergency contacts. But the unknown region's entry was different from the others. It wasn't a destination, it was a routing sequence, a series of micro-jumps through otherwise unnavigable space, and it was locked to a hardware authentication that the nav system alone couldn't resolve. The hardware was in the secondary equipment bay, secured in a case that required Palpatine's biometric authentication to open, and which Anakin opened with a precise force manipulation of the case's internal locking mechanism. Inside, a device, small and dark and old-looking beyond any reasonable estimate of its age, its housing scratched with the kind of use that accumulates across decades of repeated trips. A navigational instrument unlike anything in the Republic's standard catalog. He holds it for a moment. Then, he hands it to Barra and tells her to confirm it interfaces with the shuttle's navigation system. It does. Within the hour, they have the route. He tells Obi-Wan and shows him what the device unlocked, and Obi-Wan looks at the destination data for a long time. "How many people?" Obi-Wan says. 7, Anakin says. 2 ships. Padmé says she is coming. She says it before he can construct an argument, which is either strategy or intuition, and he considers the argument he would make. That the risk profile is unacceptable, that she has other operational value, that the mission doesn't require her specifically, and he finds that every branch of it ends at the same place. He once spent years trying to make himself the most dangerous thing in every room she might enter, to position himself between her and every possible harm, and he ended by being the harm. He knows what that architecture produces. He knows where it leads. He says, "Stay close to Rex." She nods. That's the entire conversation. Exegol registers in the Force before they drop out of hyperspace, not as a presence, as an absence. The space where life signals should exist, replaced by something that has been breathing for so long in one direction that the air has changed. He has felt dark side saturation before, on Mustafar and in the deep chambers beneath the Coruscant temple, and in the room where Palpatine kept his most private things. This is different. This is what happens when a dark side current runs for centuries through a geological substrate designed to amplify and contain it. Not a wound. A well. They come out above a surface of broken rock and perpetual lightning, an atmosphere that the instruments classify as technically breathable, and his body classifies as wrong in a way that bypasses the technical classification entirely. The structures below are old and modest by the standards of what they should become: a central spire, several auxiliary buildings, landing platforms for ships that visit rarely. From altitude it looks like a research outpost. From here, knowing what it is, it looks like a seed. They land on the secondary platform because the primary platform has cultist sentries, and Rex handles the secondary platform before they're fully down. The cultists themselves are fewer than he expected and diminished in ways that speak to the cost of long proximity to this place. Their force signatures are degraded, compressed, the specific quality of people whose connection to the Force has been running in one direction for so long that it no longer functions as a sense, it functions as a channel, carrying dark side current from the planet into them whether they choose it or not. They are not warriors, they are keepers. The brief engagement in the outer corridors resolves before it develops into anything that requires full attention, and he does not dwell on it, because the engagement is not the mission. The archives are. The main laboratory complex is below the central spire, cut into the rock itself, and when they reach it, he stands in the entrance and takes stock of what a 60-year plan looks like from the inside. It is smaller than it will become. That is the first thing. The space is perhaps the size of a large Senate committee room, lined with data storage systems and physical documentation, and 3 laboratory stations, whose purpose becomes clear within minutes of examination. One of them is biological. The work on the surface of it is preliminary, early-stage cellular manipulation, the kind of foundational research you conduct when you are working toward a result you have not yet determined how to achieve. The Jedi with technical backgrounds go to the data systems. Rex secures the perimeter. Obi-Wan walks the space with him. Bara finds the projections first and calls him over with the flat voice of someone who has just understood something they wish they didn't understand. The projections are detailed. They are confident. They span 63 years of development laid out in phases, each phase contingent on the previous, each phase building toward a fleet, an administration, a structure of power that would operate beneath the surface of whatever replaced the Republic until it was ready to replace that too. The language is not the language of a man who was hoping. It is the language of a man who was timing. He reads it without expression. He reads the biological notes, the early work on cellular replication, the failed attempts, the clinical notation around subjects that did not survive the process. Records of biological work whose purpose he cannot yet fully name, early attempts at something that has no finished form, vessels for a will that has not yet found its container. Each failure documented with the same dispassionate precision as everything else in this archive. He does not slow down on these. He reads them and moves forward. He pulls what can be used for intelligence purposes, fleet construction contacts, financial routing, the names of people across the galaxy who had agreed to serve a thing that hadn't arrived yet. He sets this aside, carefully. It will matter for what comes after. Then, he finds the Vader file. It is stored separately from the operational material, in a subdirectory that requires a different authentication. Palpatine's personal research records, segregated from the general archive the way you would segregate notes you did not expect to share. It is extensive. It spans decades of projected entries, some of which were written before the events they describe and some after, and the distinction between projection and record is handled in the margin notation with the same clinical precision applied to everything else. He reads about the suit, the design philosophy of it, not the engineering, the philosophy, the specific ways in which an absolute dependence on a life support system could be leveraged to create psychological compliance. The breathing, the deliberate limitation of sensory input, the management of physical pain as a conditioning tool, each element annotated with projected outcomes and in later entries observed outcomes, the gap between them noted and adjustments recorded. He reads about himself, about the specific characteristics identified as leverage points, attachment, pride, the particular quality of his fear, which Palpatine's notes describe with more precision than anyone should have about another person's interior life. He reads the word asset, used in ways that make the political alliance calculation from 3 days ago feel like looking in a mirror. He reads the entry about Padmé, about her function in the conditioning architecture, about the design trajectory of that loss. He reads all of it. The contrast surfaces not as a scene but as a sensation, the inside of the suit. The specific experience of living inside what these notes describe, from the other direction. From the location of the observation, rather than the location of the clinical prose. What it felt like to breathe mechanically and not know it was designed to make breathing feel like permission. What it felt like to have your fear for someone calibrated and refined and aimed back at you like a tool. He releases it. He closes the file. He finds the ignition point for the primary data system, and he begins the destruction of the archive section by section, the way you clear a minefield, methodically, systematically, no rushing, each section confirmed before moving to the next. It takes longer than the battle did. He does not use rage. There is no rage for this. There is just the work. And the work has an end, and he moves toward the end of it. When he reaches the subdirectory where the Vader file is stored, he pauses for exactly as long as it takes to confirm that the intelligence pull does not include it, that the only copy that will exist after this moment is the one in his memory, which he cannot clear and has not tried to. He burns it. He stands in the cooling light of the destroyed archive and breathes the wrong air of Exegol and does not say anything to Obi-Wan, who has been watching from the doorway. He does not say anything to anyone. He goes back to the ship. The reconstituted council meets in one of the temple's mid-level chambers, not the spire. The spire is still being cleared of the garrison's presence, room by room, and using it would require a ceremony that nobody has the energy for. The mid-level chamber has 12 seats, most of them occupied by people who are alive because of a sequence of decisions that began on a landing platform 9 days ago, and the light through its windows is the pale gray of a Coruscant morning that doesn't know yet what it's supposed to be. Yoda offers him the rank of Jedi Master. He has imagined this moment before, in a different life, in the specific way that a 22-year-old who wants something badly imagines eventually receiving it. The Anakin Skywalker who sat in this room and was told he was on the council, but not granted the rank, had a reaction to that asymmetry that became part of everything that followed. He sits in the chair across from Yoda, and he feels nothing that resembles that old want. "I'm not what a Jedi Master should be," he says. And I think we all know that. What you need are people who can teach others how to live inside uncertainty without losing themselves. People who can sit with Padawans and model what it looks like to be at peace with not knowing. He pauses. That's not me. That's never been me. And pretending it is would be a disservice to every student who deserves better than the performance of it. Yoda's eyes stay on him for a long time. In the Force, the ancient master's presence is the specific quality it has always been, vast and patient and carrying the weight of everything he has seen across 9 centuries. He is also, Anakin suspects, the only person in the room who understands precisely what is being offered here and precisely why it is being declined. "Your own path," Yoda says finally. "You have always walked it." "Yes," Anakin says. "I have." He resigns his commission as a Jedi in writing, which is a formality, and as a formality it takes 4 minutes. The documentation is brief. He signs his name, Anakin Skywalker, not the other name, never again the other name, and he hands it to the Administrative Council, and that is the second time in his life that the formal relationship ends. The first time, it was taken. This time, it is his. He keeps his lightsaber. Outside the chamber, Ahsoka is waiting. She has been there long enough that her posture has settled into the specific quality of someone who has decided to wait however long it takes, which is a posture he recognizes from 100 missions and has always found reliable. She looks at him when he comes through the door, and she reads his face, and she nods. Once, the way you nod when a thing you expected to happen has happened. "What do you do now?" she says. "The things that need doing that no institution will commission," he says. "The gaps, the threats that don't have a formal response channel yet, the survivors who need reaching before the machinery that replaced Palpatine's machinery finds them first." He pauses. "Available to Obi-Wan and the Council if they need a resource that isn't bound by their protocols. Not beholden to anything." Ahsoka looks at him for a moment. Something in her expression is working something out, the word his role is reaching for, the shape of what he just described finding its name. "A fulcrum," she says. The word settles into its position the way the right word does when you find it. That's what that is. "If you want a name for it," he says. "I might," she says. Later, she walks with him down the corridor to where Rex is waiting with their transit, and for a while none of them say anything, and the silence has the quality of people who have been through something together and are arriving at the point where the something is past and what's ahead is simply their lives. The Naboo transition takes 3 weeks to arrange. The political architecture of what the Republic is becoming requires Padmé in the Senate for most of that time. The emergency governance framework, the reintegration negotiations with the separatist border systems, the systematic dismantling of the executive emergency powers that Palpatine accumulated in layers over 15 years. Bail Organa leads the formal process. She is the voice beside him that won't let the process be only formal. He stays on Coruscant for the first 2 weeks and handles what needs handling in the spaces Obi-Wan cannot reach officially. The network of remaining Order 66 sweeps is methodical work. Caleb Doom is found on the 3rd day by a contact in the Outer Rim. He is 14 years old and alone, and when Anakin's contact reaches him, he runs. Anakin doesn't blame him. He sends word through the channel that there is a safe location when the boy is ready. He does not pursue. He will find his own path. He always does. In the 3rd week, he takes a transport to Naboo. The lake country in the evening looks like the galaxy decided to apologize. The light at this hour comes in at a low angle off the mountains to the west, landing on the water in long gold sheets that shift when the wind moves the surface. The air smells like grass and something green and mineral from the lake itself, and it is warm in the specific way of a place that holds heat gently, rather than demanding anything from it. He stands at the water's edge. Behind him, the house. From inside it, distantly, he can hear the specific quality of his children. Not words, not names, just the sound of them. Two small presences moving through rooms, making the sounds that small lives make. The twins. Alive, growing, completely unaware of the specific weight they carry in his chest, simply by existing and being well. Padmé finds him at the water. She has been watching him stand here from the house for long enough that she made a decision about it and came down. She stands beside him and looks at the lake and says nothing for a while. Then she says, "What aren't you telling me?" She is not asking about operational details or political intelligence or the specific content of the Exegol archive. She is asking about the things she has been watching him carry since Mustafar, the weight that doesn't match the victory, the restraint that exceeds what the situation requires, the specific quality of someone who is glad to be here and cannot fully believe they are allowed to be. He is quiet for a moment. "I almost lost you," he says. "I was going to lose you, and everything I did to prevent it made it worse." She is still beside him. The water moves on its own. The last of the sun is touching the mountain ridgeline, and the light on the lake is going from gold to something softer. "But you didn't," she says. "No," he says. "I didn't." She takes his hand. The prosthetic one. She holds it the way she always holds it, without making a distinction. Without the careful quality of someone accommodating a difference, just holds it, and he feels the pressure of it through the mechno sensors, and the sensation is not the same as flesh, but it is contact, and it is real, and it is here. The sun goes down behind the mountains. One sun. Not two. He is not on Tatooine. He is not in exile. He is not watching the horizon for a future that keeps receding. He is standing at a lake on Naboo with the woman he did not lose, and his children are alive in the house behind him, and Obi-Wan is on Coruscant doing the work he was made to do, and the Jedi are fractured, but present, and learning, and the galaxy is genuinely, messily, imperfectly free. The dark side is still there. It always will be. The second heartbeat, the constant companion, the current that runs beneath everything he does and doesn't do. He doesn't fight it tonight. He doesn't manage it. He lets it be what it is, part of him, not all of him. A shadow that proves the presence of light rather than its absence. He breathes in. He breathes out. He does not think about the suit. He does not calculate anything. He does not build a plan or assess an asset or catalog what cannot be recovered. He stands at the edge of the lake with his hand in Padmé's and his children's voices drifting down from the house and the water moving in the last of the light, and for the first time in as long as he can remember in either life, he is simply here. There would be harder days ahead. There always were. But they would be his days. And that, finally, was everything. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.